Welcome, mortals, to the Beautiful Dead podcast. If you've come to this channel, you should stay for several reasons. 1, you love vampires. This is a vampire podcast where we break down movies, TV shows, and books about vampires. We talk about the universe that's been created, how are they made, what rules do they have to follow, and more. Every once in a while, like October, I set aside the fiction and talk about all things vampire. 2, you have a podcast or would like to have a podcast and want to see behind the scenes of recording one. I edit out very little, so you will get to see mistakes and interruptions and learn along with me. Or 3, you're a fan of the podcast and you just want to watch me record it live. Or you like my books and you can't get enough of me. So, if you're still here, I promise it's due to your own free will, and I have not used my powers to keep you here. Now, watch the title cards and listen to the music along with the podcast. I'm gonna go get a bite, and I'll meet you back here, nice and full.
Hello? Really?
Vampire! We take your candy!
Count Dracula.
I am Dracula. And I bid you welcome, Mr. Hunt, to my house. Come in.
Our first award goes to the vampire for most blood drained in a single evening.
The strength of the vampire is that people will not believe in him.
Good evening, my fellow vampire lovers. The sun is going down, and you know what that means. It's time for me to record another episode of my podcast, The Beautiful Dead. As always, I'm your host, Lena Nazari. The quickest way to find me is to go to lenanazari.com. You can find links to all my social media, as well as ways to contact me. I just got back from Creation DC. Amazing time. I love the fandom that is around these cons. I had such a good time. I had great con neighbors, got to talk to people from all over the world, so very good memories made this last weekend. My next appearance will be a local one, and that will be at Haunted Hills Hayride on October 14th. This particular hayride has a special place in my heart. Not only does it benefit the Autism Society of Pittsburgh, but I took my daughters there every year for years when it was spooky season, so I'm excited to bring the vampires to Haunted Hills Hayride on October 14th. My next con will be Monster Mania. That's Oaks, Pennsylvania, and that'll be in November. Don't come for me. Come to see the Screamcast. I'm talking the OG Screamcast. You have to meet these people. They are amazing. They're so much fun. What an amazing movie they created for us. And then come see me. After that, it will be Creation Nashville in December, and then Fan Expo NOLA in January. And then I will be taking a break in the wintertime to finish my 4th book. Speaking of books, make sure you come back here October 29th to see or hear the first hour of the Bite Shift audiobook, which I've been working very hard on, and y'all get to see or hear the first hour, so that is very exciting. Tonight's Vampire Tea, I'm doing Guilty Pleasures, and I actually made it into an iced tea this evening. I love the blackberry in here, and I thought, I wonder what it would be like iced, and delicious. If you have not checked out Vampire Tea, what are you doing? Go check it out. The link is in the video description. as well as the link to the music that I will be using. I got great feedback from the first part of the Vampire Iceberg, and the music I'm going to continue to use underneath, and that is a soundtrack written by Chris Miskus to go along with his novel, which I thought was very creative. And the link to that is also in this video's description. So, like I said, hearing very good feedback on the first part of the Vampire Iceberg Explained. So this second part is a lot. It's a big undertaking. So we're going to jump right in, strap in, put your oxygen tanks on, because we are headed under the water to talk about Layer 3 of the Vampire Iceberg. And like I said in the first part of this, the Reddit user who created this iceberg is Big Moi, so thank you to them if they ever watch this. All right, Layer 3, we are below. Ballad of Lenore. This was written in 1773. It's a vampire poem, and it tells the story of Lenore. She's awaiting the return of her fiancé William from battle. When the other soldiers arrive home without William, she's extremely distressed. She screams out to God, saying all kinds of really nasty things to him about taking her fiancé away. And that night, someone who looks like William shows up on Lenore's door and says, "Come ride with me to our marriage bed." So she does this, but very quickly recognizes that the horse is traveling faster than any natural horse would be able to. So then when William is asked, like, hey, what is going on? Why are we moving so fast? He said, because the dead travel fast. They arrive at the cemetery, and the marriage bed is actually William's grave. The man that she's been riding with is actually Death. The dead dance as the ground sinks, and Lenore is pulled under to her demise because she was screaming at God. This is her punishment. While William didn't truly rise from the grave as a vampire, the poem itself is a very big part of vampire and goth culture, so it does deserve a mention on this iceberg. Dracula's Guest. It's a short story written by Bram Stoker, published in a collection of short stories called Dracula's Guest and Other Weird Stories. And this was published in 1914. It's rumored to be the first chapter of the Dracula novel that was deleted prior to publication because it was deemed unimportant to the story. So I guess the editors or the publisher or he decided to go ahead and cut it out. It's very easy to find if you would like to go read it. So go help yourself and read Dracula's Guest. Family of the Vortilac. This is a Gothic novella from 1839, and it's written by Alexei Tolstoy. Vortilac is a derivative of a Slavic term that means vampires, and we're actually going to talk about it in the fourth layer. It tells the story of this French diplomat who goes to this little Serbian village, and he's staying with like a host family. And the family is Gorcha, and then the son's name is Georges, Pierre, and then there's a daughter. Did I write it down? Senka. So they're all there, and they discover that Gorcha has left because he's gone on a hunt, and he is going for this Turkish outlaw, and he says to his son, if I don't come back, if I come back even a minute after 10 days, then you need to stake me because I've become a vampire. So they're assuming somehow they know that this Turkish outlaw is a vampire, and so the dad says to the son, if it takes me more than 10 days to return, even 1 minute more, then you need to stake me because I'm a vampire. So when the man returns, it's been exactly 240 hours, like to the second. So the two sons quarrel about what do we do, what do we do? So the Frenchman leaves before the decision is made, right? 6 months later, he returns, and now the village is overrun by vampires because ostensibly Gorcha has returned as a vampire. The sons argue. Ultimately, they decide either not to stake the vampire or they wait too long, and then the vampire turns the whole village. So that's the story. Good story if you haven't read it. Go check it out. The New England Vampire Panic. Now, this is a huge topic. I could do a whole episode on this, and I have mentioned it in previous episodes, but in a nutshell, let's talk about it. It's 19th century, it's New England, so it's like Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Vermont, I think. And there's an outbreak of tuberculosis. We now know it's tuberculosis. So, it's a bacteria. Now we know that it's treatable. Back then it wasn't as treatable, but it was believed that TB was actually caused by your relatives rising from the grave and coming back and infecting you. So, you know, one person is ground zero. That's the first patient. Tuberculosis, for those of you who don't know, is very easy to catch. It passes quickly, unfortunately. So they believe that it's from people who have died and are coming back and now like sucking the life out of you. And then obviously people cough up blood and stuff. We know this. So the locals start to exhume the bodies and they're looking for signs of the one that is spreading this consumption. So they start looking. They say that you could turn the vampire upside down so that if it wakes and starts to try and climb out of the grave, it actually crawls itself down further into the dirt. So they would like exhume people and flip them over. They also would decapitate them, or if they found a dead body where the organs still looked fresh, they would pull them out and burn them. And if you breathed in the smoke from the burning vampire, then it was actually supposed to cure you. So if you were afraid that possibly you have caught this vampirism, then you burn these organs and breathe in the smoke and it's supposed to cure you. So if you think that was like, must have been thousands of years ago, I hate to break it to you, but the first exhumation was in 1793. The last one was in 1892. It's not that long ago if you think about it, okay? So we're not talking like 1,000 years ago. Anywho, hate to break it to you, if you think that like crazy stuff like this only happens in Eastern Europe, sorry guys, it just happened up north like 120 years ago, so. All right. Oh, Tomb of Dracula. That's the next one on this layer. This is a comic book series that was published from Marvel 1972 to 1979. 70 issues would be published. It's about a group of vampire hunters who fight Dracula. They also sometimes will get Dracula to like help them fight the bad guy, so they join forces to go after a bigger bad guy, and Dracula sort of joins the club, but then they're right back to fighting him. He would also show up in the Spider-Verse. He would fight Blade, and he even at one point fought the X-Men. So, you know, busy guy, that Dracula. Good Lady Duquesne. This is actually a really good story if you've never read it. It tells the story of Bella, not that Bella, but this is about Bella Rolstein, who's this very poor girl. She's young. I think she's like in her late teens, early 20s. She's in a very, very poor family. I believe her mother is like sick, so she has to work to provide for herself and her mother, and she gets connected to this wealthy Lady Duquesne, and she wants a companion to go with her to Italy. So Bella's like, awesome, like what a great gig. I'm going to go to Italy with this rich lady, and then I'm going to help pay for my mom. Slowly but surely we find out that the lady's previous two companions get paler and paler and weaker and sicker over time, and then they die. This is the usual tale of the rich taking advantage of the poor. That's what the whole thing was about. And the other thing you need to know is, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. It's another lesson we've learned from stories like this. Like if a house is worth $500,000 and they're selling it for $80,000, run. Anywho, duh, the rich lady is a vampire, so moving on. Ganja and Hess. This one I actually covered on this channel, and oh boy. So if you listened to the episode or watched it, you'll know my feelings about this particular movie. It's a movie, if I haven't said that. Ganja and Hess is a movie from 1973. It was written and directed by Bill Gunn, who was also in it. Bill Gunn, by the way, I'm getting distracted. Anywho. Oh, and the guy who plays Ben in Night of the Living Dead is also in it. I was halfway through the movie before, and I was like, I know this guy. Ben from Night of the Living Dead. Anywho. Oh boy. This movie is about this anthropologist, Dr. Hess, who goes to study this African tribe like in the middle of nowhere and stumbles across this artifact which he brings back to the States. So now he is this well-respected anthropology professor, and this guy comes over to be his new assistant, I believe, and the guy's like not okay, and that night he gets really drunk, he attacks Dr. Hess, and then kills himself, and Dr. Hess like hits him with the statue, or the statue is close, and he rises from the dead, and then he drinks the guy's blood. It's so confusing. I wish I had a better way to describe it, but it really is that confusing a movie. And if it's not confusing enough, then the guy's widow, Ganja, shows up. They fall in love very quickly. She gets over her missing husband real quick. Even finds the dead body like down in the basement at one point. I'm ruining the whole movie. Sorry, guys. Long story short, he's a type of vampire because of this African idol. He turns her into a vampire. It doesn't end well. That's all I'm going to say. Really, just... It's one of those movies that's on all of the must-watch vampire lists. I say just go watch my episode about it and then you can decide. We gotta move on. I'm so distracted. 18th century vampire panic. So I'm pretty sure this one's referencing one that's similar to what happened in New England, but it was happening over in Europe, kind of around the same time. And it actually might have actually fueled some of what was happening in New England. But vampires were being spotted and hunted and destroyed all over the place. Specifically, Serbia seemed to kind of be ground zero for this particular panic. This is not the only vampire panic, but this one was in Serbia, and it can be traced back to the death of a man named Peter, who we're going to talk about in another layer, in 1725. Everybody said that after he died, he was coming back and killing, I think it was 9 people, and that was kind of the beginning of this whole vampire panic thing. It actually got so out of control that authorities from Habsburg came to try and like find out what was going on, or at least get people to calm down and act rational. Anyone who went through the satanic panic in the 80s knows what I'm talking about. Shadow of the Vampire. Of course we have covered this one. It's an amazing movie. What kind of vampire podcast would I be running if I had not talked about Shadow of the Vampire? So it's a 2000 movie. It was nominated for several Oscars, which is rare for horror, especially a vampire film, to get nominated for Oscars. But it tells the story of the making of Nosferatu, the 1920s film. Where, remember we talked about in the previous episode that there was a rumor going around that the actor who played Nosferatu was really a vampire, and that's why he was so good? Well, this movie tells the story of the making of Nosferatu if Max Schreck really was a vampire. Incredible movie. I'm going to move on because I don't want to ruin anything for you. Vorvan. This is a vampire race in space on the show Buck Rogers. They have mind control over humans. Their spaceship is called the Demeter, which of course is the ship from Dracula that takes Dracula from Transylvania to England in the novel. But that's what Vorvan is. Black Sunday. Black Sunday is an Italian horror film. It was from 1960. It tells the story of a vampiric witch, which we see that combo a lot. Her name's Asa. She's sentenced to death in 1630, but is resurrected 200 years later when blood is dripping onto her, which you know usually does not go well. When you accidentally cut something and drip blood on a burial plot, usually doesn't go well for the humans. European vampire burials. I think this refers to the way that suspected vampires were buried over the centuries in different areas. So for example, they would put a scythe over the throat so that if the vampire tried to sit up, it would decapitate itself. They would shove bricks in your mouth to stop you from rising and biting people. Padlocks on toes, burying them upside down. These are all ways that they tried to prevent vampires from rising. I don't know if you guys know about the vampire cemetery here in Pennsylvania, but that was another one with the iron cages over top. Vampire prevention. This is a huge topic to just be like a mention on a layer. Obviously, I just did a whole episode on it, but there's different ways you can prevent vampire attacks. Wearing crucifixes, not going out at night. You could do garlic, holy water. Some cultures have like different branches and thorns and things you can sew into your clothes. Roses, I know, is one of them. There's 1,000 ways to prevent vampire attacks. It really depends on the type of vampire and what country you live in. So go watch the episode. Carmilla. Oh my gosh. If you know vampires, you know Carmilla. Everybody knows Carmilla. And I've heard that name used in so much vampire fiction because it is so iconic. So this was first a book by Irish author Sheridan Le Fanu, published in 1872, and it tells the story of a young woman named Laura who has been preyed upon by this beautiful woman since she was 6. Let that sink in. Since she was 6, she would see this like beautiful woman off in places, and like over the years she keeps seeing this woman. Now she's 18, and this woman, her name is Carmilla, comes into the home, and Laura immediately recognizes her. Like, this is the woman I see, this is the woman I dream about. They appear to be the same age. Spoiler alert, Carmilla is a vampire. Not only was this a sexy vampire story, but it was a lesbian vampire story. The shock! This story has inspired so many vampire stories and movies, including Dracula. This was one of the novels that inspired Dracula, which came out 20 years after this. Just type the name Carmilla into the search bar. Someday I'll do an episode just on Carmilla. Kronos. Yes, I have done an episode on this one as well. This is Guillermo del Toro's vampire film. Won a bunch of awards. It's a vampire movie released in 1992 in Spanish. It tells the story of sweet old Jesus, who's a grandfather and an antiques dealer, and he finds a statue, and inside the statue is this like golden scarab, holds it in his hand, it grabs onto him, vampire. His big thing is like classic vampire stuff. He starts to look younger, his libido is stronger, he's craving blood, and then it also, I don't want to give too much away, just watch the movie or watch my episode. But long story short, he has to choose between, you know, the things he loves and this eternal existence. Fearless Vampire Killers. I have also done an episode on this one. This is a horror comedy from 1967 with Mr. Roman Polanski and Miss Sharon Tate. We all know how things turned out for her. It's heartbreaking. Tells the story of 2 vampire hunters who are in like Transylvania searching for this famous count. They stay at an inn, and the younger hunter falls for a beautiful girl who's kidnapped by a vampire and taken up to his castle. They follow up to the castle, and nuttiness ensues. There's a vampire ball. There's a horny tavern owner. There's a girl who takes a lot of baths. Go check it out. Enough said, right? Mona the Vampire. This is actually a cartoon show from Canada from the 2000s, like 1999 until like 2006. The spoiler alert. The main character is a 10-year-old girl named Mona. She is not a vampire, but she really has like a very good imagination, and she imagines that she's a vampire. So very cute. La Morte Amoureuse, which means the dead woman in love. It's a French short story published in 1836, narrated by an old priest who tells a story of his first love, who was this beautiful woman. Then he had just been ordained. It was like right after he gets ordained, falls in love with this beautiful woman, and despite his vows, he does carry on this love affair only to realize, let's say it together, she's a vampire. As many vampire stories from this time, the vampire represents eroticism and the things that we know that we shouldn't do, but we do them anyway. It's a way of teaching you that you need to control your urges and control your lust, because if you don't, it will be your ruin. What a way to go, right? All right. Martin. Oh, Martin is a 1977 vampire movie. I've not covered this one yet, but I've wanted to. It's written and directed by Mr. George Romero, horror god, shot right here in Pittsburgh. And it tells the story of Martin, who states that he is an 84-year-old vampire. He murders and has to like drink blood to feed his bloodlust, and he comes to Pittsburgh to live with his family. And some do believe that he's undead. Some think like he needs a little professional help. I won't say much about it because I do want to cover this on a future episode, but Pittsburgh, George Romero, vampires, what's there not to love? Vampire's Kiss. Of course I covered this one. Are you kidding me? Vampire's Kiss, I think, when did I do it? I think it was like right before I went and saw Renfield. So it would have been this year in honor of Mr. Nicolas Cage. Anywho, I'm distracted. So it tells the story of Peter Lowe, played by Nicolas Cage, who meets a beautiful woman at a club and takes her home. She bites him, and then he believes that he is starting to turn into a vampire. There's many famous scenes and lines from this. Not to ruin it, spoiler alert, he's not a vampire. He's going insane, but amazing movie. One of those must-see vampire films. Scenes that you've probably seen, even if you haven't seen the movie because they're so famous. So go check it out. Isle of the Dead. So this is a 1945 movie starring Mr. Boris Karloff. It's set in 1912 in Greece. While a lot is left to the imagination and the vampirism is sort of vague, there's a female on this island that it is believed is a type of vampire. And to hear it explained, specifically, she's an energy vampire, I believe. It's implied that she doesn't even know that she's a vampire. It's believed that the plague hitting the island is a punishment from the gods for harboring this vampire. It's a very good movie. It's one of those films that 5 people could watch it and 5 people could interpret it in different ways. But that is called Isle of the Dead. It's on this tier, so we're gonna cover it. Polidori's the Vampire and Lord Byron. This is such a good story if you don't know it. So basically, Lord Byron has a weekend at one of his manors, and he invites a few people over, and they have a competition to see who can write the scariest short story. Out of this competition came Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and also John Polidori's The Vampire. So John Polidori was actually the doctor of Lord Byron. So not necessarily expecting like something very creative to come out of him, but I mean, I'm a nurse and I write. He's a doctor, good for him. So he writes this story, and this story actually influenced future writers, including Bram Stoker. So we would not have Dracula if it weren't for this random weekend where he sat down and wrote this story, The Vampire. Oh, I wanted to say, if you guys have never seen it, go check out this movie called Gothic. And it has Natasha Richardson and Julian Sands and Gabriel Byrne, and it actually tells the story of that weekend. Such a good movie. Sorry for the edit, YouTube, but my battery just died. So John Polidori's The Vampire was actually the end of Layer 3, so we did it. Layer 4 it's meaty. So we are gonna go ahead and cover Layer 4, which I am calling It's Not Too Late to Turn Back. I'm going to apologize now for any pronunciations that I mess up. Layer 4, at a cursory glance, is basically vampires from all over the world. All the different types of vampires that you see from around the world. Some of these we have talked about before, some of them we haven't. Some of them I know how to pronounce, some of them I do not. So you're going to have to bear with me. And right out of the gate, this is one I struggle with. Vraikalakis. This is a Greek vampire. And this is one that we have talked about before. We talked about it in the Protecting Yourself Against Vampires episode. The Vraikalakis, which does not get easier to say, are undead creatures from this Greek folklore that we talked about. They are referred to as vampires, even though they actually prefer to devour flesh over blood. On the Isle of the Dead, that was one of the vampires that they were assuming that this young woman would be. They are the reanimated corpses of those that have already died who returned after being buried in unconsecrated ground or having lived a life full of sin. Their first mission when they return is to go back to the house of their family. And remember, these are the ones that will knock on your door. And you have to wait because they will only knock once. So if the knocker does it twice, then you're good. It's not a reanimated corpse. So there you go. Tip for you. Arbuthnot is an Irish vampire legend. So it tells the story of this Arbuthnot. That's what we're going to go with. A local chieftain who was also a little person or small-statured who was just horrible to his people, completely villainous. So finally, I don't know if this is important to know, but when I was doing the research, they actually said that they think he was a wizard as well. So I don't know. Anywho, he was an extremely jealous man who loved his wife, but was a little obsessive, and he was so sure she was having an affair that one night he climbed out the window to climb over to her bedroom and look in, and he fell to his death. The people were not sad, we'll just say that. Unfortunately, the next night, he comes walking into the Great Hall with this bowl and starts demanding that people slit their wrists and fill the bowl with their blood to feed him. And so now he's even worse. So the people don't know what to do. They go to a chieftain in the local town, next door, and ask him, please, please, please come slay our king. And the guy's like, sure, no problem. Comes, slays him. He rises the next day and shows up with his bowl of blood. They do it again, comes back the next day. So they're at their wits' end. So they go to this local, I don't know, witch doctor, local magician, local whatever. And they say, what do we need to do? And he says, well, you're dealing with this vampire, so you need to bury him upside down. No, wait. You have to pierce his heart with a yew tree stake, a stake made out of a yew tree. Stab him in the heart, bury him upside down, put a bunch of stuff on top of it, like ash branches and thorns and stuff. Then you have to lay this stone slab over top. So they did all of that. He never came back, thank goodness. But you can actually go visit that site. And people say if you go to visit that site, then you get really bad luck. So it's a heck of a legend. Ireland, you guys know how to make some legends, let me tell you. Striga, we have talked about in other episodes. This is actually more of a witch, but it gets tied in with vampires, so a vampiric witch. This is from Albania. She flies out at night looking to suck the blood of babies, especially newborn babies. Only the Striga herself can cure those that she's bitten. Commonly, they are old women with hateful faces, wearing cloaks. So, it's just a way for people to continue to be scared of women, basically. Ramanga, we have talked about this before too. This is a vampire out of Africa that normally will do the bidding of the chief, and they don't just drink blood, they also eat toenails. I don't judge, I'm just repeating. Puchen. This is a creature from Chile. It's a shapeshifter, and while it can change into many forms, the most terrifying, in my opinion, is a giant flying snake that can paralyze you with its gaze, so it can then attack you, steal your heart, drink your blood, and leave no marks. Yeesh, Chile. Goodness gracious. This is one of those ones. I'm gonna give it the old college try. Papin Jawara. Oh, that's pretty good. Papanjawari is a Tiwi creature that's a one-eyed giant who lives in a large hut where the sky ends, whatever that means. Shooting stars are said to be the Papanjawaris stalking across the heavens while they're burning. They have a burning fire stick in one hand and a fighting club in the other. Papanjawaris feed on the bodies of the dead and the blood of the sick. They're able to locate sick people by smell, and upon finding the victim, will make themselves invisible and then suck the person's blood without leaving a wound. As the sick person weakens, the Papanjawari makes itself small enough to enter the body through the mouth or nose and then drink up the rest of the blood from the inside. Okay. Mulo, we've talked about this before. This is an Romany vampire creature that happens when somebody dies suddenly or does not get like a proper funeral. So if you like die out in battle and you're just left out there, you're gonna rise as a Mulo. They're all white. They wear all white. They have hair down to their feet. And if you're someone that they didn't like in life, you better watch out because you're the first on their list. They're going to come find you, they're going to attack you, strangle you, and then drink all your blood. Nuri-onna comes from Japan. Oh, Japan, you're another one that can make a heck of a legend. Nuri-onna comes from Japan, and it's a woman with the body of a snake. She carries with her a small childlike bundle, which she uses to attract potential victims. If a well-intended person asks to hold the baby, she will hand the baby over. If they attempt to discard the bundle, however, it's revealed that it's not a child inside at all. The bundle becomes incredibly heavy, preventing the victim from fleeing, and then she will use her long, snake-like tongue to drain all your blood. Don't fall for the babies. Nukikubi, sticking with Japan here. Nukikubi appears as a human, except their necks stretch very long or the head completely detaches to fly around. They attack at night and drink the blood of their victims. To stop them, just move the body when the head's flying around. It can't find its way back. There's no like GPS or anything. And then it will actually wither and die out there. Pretty easy. Much like that, the Manangagal. See, I've talked about this one before. I shouldn't be stumbling. The Mananagal. Gotta slow that one down. I talk about that one in my vampire panel when I go to cons, and you would think that I wouldn't have trouble, but Mananangal. I just need to slow it down. That's from the Philippines. And that's another one where the head separates and it flies around at night looking. This one specifically wants to drink the blood of pregnant women, which is dark, but okay. It uses its long proboscis tongues to drink blood. And sometimes they say like that when the upper half detaches, like great bat-like wings show up. Okay. But the same thing, if you can like move the lower half, or other people say if you stick pieces of glass in the lower half, then it can't reattach and then it withers and dies. Ashwang are shapeshifters from the Philippines. Specifically there's different type of Ashwang, but specifically the type of Ashwang that are the most vampiric are the Mandarugo. The Mandarugo is a young, beautiful woman during the day, but at night it grows wings and a long, sharp tongue that it uses to cut a man's neck or prick the inside of the mouth while you're kissing to drink your blood. Could you imagine like some hot chick comes up to you and just starts making out with you and then cuts you from the inside? Again, it's just a way for them to teach you to like control yourself. Lang Shuyar is a Malaysian vampire, specifically the spirit of a woman who dies while pregnant or during childbirth. They often are beautiful with long hair down to their feet and long fingernails, and their victim of choice is babies. Oy. Also Malaysia, I'm going to have to slow this one down too. The Penanggalan is a vampire ghost that comes in the form of a woman's head, just the head, with like organs and entrails coming out, like an octopus, I don't know, like a squid or a jellyfish. It from far away looks like a ball of light, but as it gets closer, like, is that a woman's head with entrails coming out of it? Yes, it is. But by then you're in big trouble because she's gonna get you. Putting thorns around your window is a way to protect you, because as she tries to fly in, her entrails will get stuck on the thorns and then she'll be trapped there until sunlight. Yeesh. Aufhacker. This is a German one. This is a little harder to pin down because it can be a goblin or a beautiful woman or a dead man or several types of animals. So just, beware everybody. While some say the creature will leap on your back and grow heavier and heavier and heavier until you die from exhaustion, others say that the Aufhacker will rip out your throat and drink your blood. Most commonly, they are found outside of cemeteries and bridges. So if you're walking over a bridge outside a cemetery and you see a woman or a goblin or a dead guy or an animal, run. Vordulak, we talked about this. That's a Russian vampire that specifically attacks the whole family. So that was the story we talked about in Layer 3, the family of the Vordulak. That's the type of vampire we were talking about. Capolobo is a Brazilian legend that comes in two forms. It can be animal or it can be humanoid. The animal form is very similar to like a wild dog. The other form, little easier to spot. The head of a giant anteater, the body of a human with bottle-shaped legs. I don't even know what that is. If somebody is watching this and you are an artist, can you please draw this and send it to me? We'll do it again. The head of a giant anteater, the body of a human with bottle-shaped legs, and the whole thing is covered in hair. Wow. Anywho, according to legend, it will squeeze you and like break all your ribs and stuff and then drink your blood as it pours out of you. This is another one I hate saying out loud, and we've talked about this one before. Yara Mayahu. Yara Mayahu. Australia, you say the silliest things. Yara Mayahu, we've talked about, comes from the Aboriginal legends of Australia. This creature resembles a little red frog-like man with a very big head and a large mouth with no teeth and suckers on the ends of its hands and feet. Again, artist, can we draw this? Yara Mayarhu is a little red frog-like man with a big head, a large mouth with no teeth, and suckers on the ends of its hands and feet. It lives in fig trees, and if you're the dummy that walks under a fig tree in Australia, it will leap on you and it will drink your blood. Oh, and it uses the suckers on its feet to drink your blood. God. Okay, bear with me. Kayu Ketsuki. Kayu Ketsuki. The only thing I could find on this one, this entry, is that it was a vampire anime character. But considering everything else on this layer, I think it has to be based on a real legend, because everything else on this layer is real legends from countries of real vampires. So I was a little confused about this one. Moving on. Burbalang. It's a Filipino legend, and it is more like a ghoul than a vampire. It lives in a cemetery and it digs up corpses and eats it, or if it has to, will attack a living person to eat it. So that's really more like a ghoul than a vampire, but it was on here, so we're gonna do it. Lamashtu. Lamashtu is actually a Mesopotamian goddess. She apparently harasses pregnant women. Pregnant ladies, I don't know why everybody's going after you, but she harasses pregnant women, and if given the chance, will steal the baby to gnaw on its bones and drink its blood. She is often connected to Lilith, who we will talk about at the end of this layer. Vitala or Batala, these are Hindu legends. These spirits inhabit a corpse and then they reanimate it to prey on the living. So this would be more like the vampires from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and the fact that it's like an evil spirit possessing a body to be a vampire. They can not only kill and feed on you, but if they want to, they can drive you mad or cause miscarriages. Batal is a form of Bhairava, who is the god who in the Hindu legend is in charge of like the demons and vampires and ghosts, basically. Estries, these are female vampires from the Jewish faith, very similar to like a succubi, basically. They're beautiful, they'll come, like seduce you and then drink your blood. They are referred to as demons. So, you know, men, just stay with your wives, okay? Don't cheat. Upir, so this one, if anybody's ever watched Hemlock Grove, you know what an Upir is, but Upir we've talked about before on this podcast. They're vampires from like a Slavic or Turkish descent. It is a person who was cursed before death, or a person who died suddenly, or someone where the corpse was desecrated. Upirs arrive at night. Sometimes they carry their own heads in their arms, which I think would give somebody a double take. Or if the head was not detached, they have glowing wolf-like eyes. Some of them apparently can like menace people during the daytime. It is also said that they will sometimes climb bell towers and then shriek, and their shriek will kill people. Yeesh. Upirs do drink human blood, and they use their superhuman strength to tear their victims to shreds. Like I said, they can kill with their shrieks, but then another thing I found said they can kill with their breath. Ooh, I know some people like that. They like to harass people, will sometimes suffocate them, sometimes they make them sleepwalk. There's like so many claims from people that Upirs have come to visit them at night. Specifically, a lot of widows will say that their husband comes back as an Upir. Yeesh. Juboko is a Japanese legend, and it's actually a tree. So it's a tree that rises in a place where there's been a great deal of blood spilt. So think like a battleground. So this special tree, this Jubokyo tree, rises up and it like sucks up all the blood with its roots. Well, the problem is like then it's out of blood in the ground, so then it goes after people. So if you walk by this Juboko tree, it will like grab you and pull you in and start drinking your blood. I don't even know how to say this. Tahalpuchi, no. Yikes. Tlahuelpuchi. Should we look it up together? I bet Google will tell us how to say it. Even Google's like, I don't know how to say that. Oh, here we go. It's a Mexican legend, so hopefully somebody from Mexico is actually gonna say this so we get it right.
Tlahuelpuchi.
Tlahuelpuchi. I never would have said it like that.
Tlahuelpuchi.
Tlahuelpuchi. That's what we're gonna go with. Anywho, like I said, it is from Mexico, and this is another vampiric witch. So it is classified under witch, but then it's also listed under vampire. Specifically, it will come and live with a human family. It can shapeshift or suck the blood of infants. Again, we're going after babies. It has a glowing aura when it shapeshifts, so whatever it turns into, at least it will like glow, so you know that something's off. Apparently they are born this way. It's a curse and they can't avoid it, and it will first like start to manifest at puberty. It's a weird one. And of course, most of them are female. So we're just like teaching society to fear women who menstruate, as per the usual. Salem looking at you. Moving on. Nachzeras, we have talked about before. This is a German vampire. A person does not become a Nachzerer from being bitten or scratched. It actually happens after death, and it can't be passed on. So I'm not exactly sure, like, how do some people rise and some people don't? I don't know. They are often related to sickness and disease. So if a large group of people die, like, I don't know, a plague, it's blamed on these Noxeros. And they say that it will go after a relative first. Often killing this, according to myth, is by placing a coin in its mouth and then chopping off its head. So basically the plagues would happen. They would trace the plague back to like patient 0. And then who's ever like that patient 0, whatever one of their relatives have died most recently must be the Noxera. So coin in the mouth, head chopped off. Jiangshi, we have talked about so many times. Jiangshi are the Chinese hopping vampires, and the reason they hop is because they are kind of like zombies in the fact that they rise and they're very stiff, but they do go about, you know, looking to drink blood and attack humans. But the reason they're called hopping vampires is because the stiffness is kicked in, so their knees don't bend, so they kind of like walk with their arms out like zombies, but they hop because they can't walk or bend their knees because of the rigor mortis. It's a weird one, but that's the Jiangshi. We've talked about them before. So this was listed as lightning bird, but actually we have talked about this one before too. This is the Impundulu, and that is from the Zulu tribe, and it's this creature that takes the form of a big black and white bird. It's the size of a person, and the reason it's called a lightning bird is because it can like summon thunder and lightning around it, and that's how you can recognize what it is. Again, this is a vampiric creature that's associated with witchcraft. So usually what it is there's a family of witches that has a Impundulu that sort of does its bidding. So it belongs to a witch, and its bidding is to go out and drink blood. And of course, as always, it sometimes takes the form of a beautiful young woman to seduce men, so blah, 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 blah. Again, it's just telling you guys to like stick with one lady, okay? Asima. Asima is also called a Sukuyant, which is a shape-shifting, blood-sucking legend in the Caribbean. We haven't been out to the Caribbean yet. It appears as a reclusive old woman by day, but at night she strips off her wrinkled skin and puts it into a mortar, which if you guys don't know is like those big stone bowls that you see people like smashing herbs with. Then she turns into a fireball and flies across the sky in search of victims. The Sukuyant can enter the home of the victim through any sized hole, so like cracks, keyholes, anything. She will suck the human's blood from different soft regions. It says soft regions. While you sleep, leaving black and blue marks on the body in the morning. If it draws too much blood, it's believed the victim will either die and become Sukuyant themselves or just completely perish. And then if that happens, the Sukuyant will actually take that person's skin and like have a new skin. The Sukuyant, according to legend, does practice black magic, and it trades the victim's blood for their evil powers with whatever demon it's made a deal with. And so I want to take that and jump into the Lugaru, which is also on this tier. A Lugaru is very, very similar. We have talked about it on this podcast before. So this time the witch works for the devil himself. So Sukuyant works for, you know, a lesser demon. And then Lugaru works for the devil himself. So at night she goes out, leaving her skin under a tree, goes out as a fiery ball looking for people, but her thing is that she has to take the blood from the humans to take back to the devil. So she doesn't take it for herself, she gives it to the devil to continue their pact. And the way to kill her is hide her skin or trap her. So if you trap her till morning and she doesn't bring the devil his blood, you know, he'll just take care of business for you. So that's how the Lugaru works. Bivonsi, we have talked about. I talked about it on my TikTok. I don't know if I talked about it on here. But Bivonsi, this is a Scottish Highland legend. And it's a beautiful woman, usually a red-headed woman, but a beautiful woman wearing a long green dress. And the reason she has a long green dress is because it covers her hooved feet. And she will come out at night and she will seduce passersby to come to her so that she can then drink their blood. So yeah, that's the Vivancy. Chupacabra. So I was a little like taken aback to see that on a vampire iceberg, but I get it. So Chupacabra, Mexican legend, we've all heard about it. It can present as something that almost looks like a mix between like a coyote and a dingo. Or it can have like spikes down its back and look a little more reptilian. But the whole point is that it goes out and it drinks the blood of livestock. So it is a vampiric creature, definitely. But Chupacabra, everybody knows about that one. Aluka. Aluka is a vampire from the Hebrew mythology. The most detailed description of the Aluka appears in a 12th century text, where the creature is understood to be a living human that can change into a wolf. It can fly by releasing its long hair. So it like takes its ponytail down and this hair can make it fly. And would eventually die if prevented from feeding on blood for long enough time. Once dead, the vampire can be prevented from becoming a demon if you bury it with its mouth stuffed with earth. So it's a vampire that you kill, and then when you kill it, you have to stuff dirt in its mouth so it doesn't then turn into a demon. That's a little complicated. Jenglot. So this is an Indonesian creature. It has the appearance of a deformed humanoid doll that's about 5 inches in length. If a little tiny humanoid doll came running up to me, you wouldn't have to kill me. I would die of a heart attack. They have long hair that grows sparsely and is stiff down through the legs and long nails. The doll itself does nothing, but it's imbued with black magic, is said to provide protection to its master, and takes revenge on enemies. It states that they were formerly human beings, and then the keepers fed it blood, either animal or human. Then when the blood is placed near the jenglot, which is said not to drink it directly, according to this, like you set the bowl. So you set the bowl by the jenglot and walk away. And then when you come back, the blood is gone. And then now that you've created this jenglot, it will like go out and do your bidding and seek revenge for you. Yeesh, Indonesia. Goodness. Pontianak, also Indonesian. So this is both alternatively called a vampire and a vengeful female spirit. Oh, God. It is depicted as a long-haired woman dressed in white. She lures unsuspecting men to incite fear and enact revenge upon them. Signs that a Pontianak is nearby include the sound of an infant crying and the smell of a decaying corpse. They are depicted as vampiric bloodsuckers that will rip out the internal organs of men. So here we go, we got another one. Got a beautiful woman. I'll tell you what, if I was walking down the street at night and I just heard a random baby crying, I mean, who's gonna go check that out? I guess I would, because I'd be afraid it was an abandoned baby. Dang. Sorry, YouTube. Sorry, podcast. We had to pause because I had another battery die. So let's go ahead and wrap this up because this little episode is taking quite some time to record. Chon-chon, C-H-O-N, C-H-O-N, all one word, is a legend out of Chile and Argentina, and this particular creature is said to have been created through the magical concoctions of a sorcerer. It is only a head with talons and feathers and abnormally large ears that work as wings, so it can fly through a moonless night to seek out its victims. It can only be seen by other sorcerers, and it particularly likes to drink the blood of The sick or the sleeping? Going after the weak. That's not fair. Sampiro. This is actually an Albanian vampire that's kind of closer to being a revenant. It rises from the grave because it was a human that committed an unnatural act. And if you look into what that means, it's like all the things that they used to frown upon a couple decades ago. So homosexuality, a woman sleeping with a man outside of marriage, blah, blah, blah. Anywho, it comes back wearing its death shroud and high heels. Who doesn't love a good pair of high heels? I mean, come on. It walks around the night, rising 3 days after its death, wearing these high heels and its death shroud and having glowing eyes. But the thing that's so particular about this particular type of vampire is it has to keep a little bit of its grave dirt in its navel. It's interesting. Adze. A-D-Z-E. Adze is a vampire from the folklore in the Togo and Ghana region. It takes the form of a firefly, though it can transform into a human if it's captured. When in human form, the Adze has the power to possess humans. In firefly form, it can fly through like keyholes and cracks and stuff to get into your house and then suck your blood while you're sleeping, and then that causes you to fall sick and die. Draugr is an undead creature from the Norse mythology. I think we've talked about this on other ones. They live in their graves or royal palaces. Kind of a difference there. You can like hang out in a grave or a royal palace. I know which one I would pick. They guard treasure, or they take that treasure with them into their burial mound. They are revenants, which means that they are animated corpses, not necessarily vampires. So somewhere between vampire and zombie. They're said to be extremely strong, have the ability to shapeshift, and thirst for blood. The Wak-Wak is a vampire bird-like creature in the Philippines, and they call it the Wak-Wak because that's the sound that its big wings make as it's coming to get you. What's interesting about this is they say that the sound is actually louder the further away it is, and so if it starts to get very quiet, that means it's about to like grab you. The Wak-Wak has wings that look very much like a bat's. It uses its talons or claws to slash at the victim and get the blood flowing so it can drink it. Chitapee. This is one we've talked about too. This is another one of those vampire witch combos. This time it comes from India. This is said to be a woman who dies from either childbirth or a self-unaliving. The Chitapee will then come back and start to wreak havoc on men in the area. Sometimes they say that she'll ride upon a tiger, but the big thing is that these Chitapees will like slink into a man's house while they're sleeping and suck the blood through their toes, which if you remember in our protection episode, we said if you're worried about a Chitapee, just wear steel-toed boots. But it goes after men while they're sleeping, drinking blood through the toes. And if you think that you're the victim of a Chitapee, because it comes over a series of nights to drain you, then you have to go to like a local witch doctor to have yourself saved from this particular creature. Sigbin is from the Philippines. It comes out at night to suck the blood of its victims. This is terrifying. Okay, I want to read this word for word. The Sigbin is said to walk backwards with its head lowered between its hind legs and to have the ability to become invisible to other creatures. Could you imagine something walking towards you backwards with its head back between its legs? Oh my God. It resembles sometimes a hornless goat. It has very large ears which can clap like a pair of hands and a long flexible tail that can be used as a whip. You know it's coming because it emits a nauseating odor. If I saw that thing coming at me, I'm going to say it again. You don't need to murder me because I'm going to drop dead right there just from the sight of that. Oh my gosh. You don't even need to stink. Why emit a nauseating odor? You're already like terrifying to look at. All right, guys, we're almost done. I promise, we're getting close. Sybaris. This is a legend that comes out of Greece. And as soon as I describe it, you're going to know what I'm talking about. It's a giant beast that would come out of its lair at night to drink blood. As I dug deep, I realized that Sybaris is very, very close to Lamia. So I think it's Lamia. We've talked about Lamia before. This is a beautiful woman that would seduce young men in the night only to devour them. And she was said to have serpentine-like qualities. So this is that, if you've ever seen a Lamia, you'll know. It's like part woman, part snake. Very big, seduces men, and then shifts into its ultimate form only to devour them. If you've ever seen Lair of the White Worm, which we have done an episode on, then you'll know Lamia. I think that's what this Sybaris thing is. All right, so I left the last four we're going to talk about. I purposely left for the end because they're very broad topics. And we're just going to touch on them, I promise, because we're like at almost an hour and a half at this point. A ghoul. So we have talked about this before. Ghouls and vampires get mixed up a lot, but I personally do not think they are the same thing. A ghoul is a very broad subject, so I'm going to be very succinct here. It's an Arabic creature, so that's where they ultimately came from, was ancient Arabia. They skulk around graveyards, they dig up bodies because they crave human flesh. There's very, very many varieties of ghouls found in pretty much any culture. And if any of you have seen Supernatural, then you would have seen the ghoul episode. So that's what a ghoul is. It's kind of closer to a zombie, but I guess it could also be vampiric because it does devour human flesh. So in doing that, it's devouring blood, but it will feed on carrion or live victims. It doesn't really matter. So it's a very broad topic, so we're just going to move on. It's on the lair, so I wanted to mention it. Psychic vampires. Again, we could do a whole episode on this. Psychic vampires are vampires who feed off of human lives, but instead of feeding off of their blood, they feed off of their energy or their life force or their chi or whatever you would call it, their emotions. The most recent interpretation of this would be Colin Robinson from What We Do in the Shadows. Some of you may know energy vampires or psychic vampires. I think there are psychic vampires out there that don't even know they're energy vampires, but you'll know them when you're around them. But we could do a whole episode on this, and I will in the future, but I just wanted to mention it because it is on the lair. Moroi and Strigoi we're going to talk about because these also I could do a very big episode on. But these are two types of Romanian vampires. And you guys know how much I love Romania and Romanian vampire legends and lore, so I really wanted to touch on these. The Moroi are closer to being like your psychic vampire. Those are your energy vampires. Whereas Strigoi are the vampires that you're used to, the classic vampires. Troubled spirits that rise from the grave, searching to drink the blood of the living. They can transform into animals. They can become invisible if they need to, and they seek their own vitality from the blood of humans. That is Strigoi. Last but not least, Lilith. Of course I have done an episode on Lilith. Are you kidding me? If you want a whole lot about Lilith, this is not the episode to watch. Go watch Babes of the Bible from last October of 2022. But Lilith is reportedly, so this is Hebrew myth, is reportedly the first wife of Adam. Lilith was created at the same time as Adam, and Lilith would not be subservient. She wanted to be on top. She wanted to be treated like an equal, and Adam wasn't having it. So she was banished from the Garden of Eden. And at that point in time, Eve was created from Adam to be a part of Adam and to be subservient to Adam. So Lilith gets cast out into the desert, of course, is super pissed about it. And she ends up like essentially becoming demonic. She goes after Adam's progeny, and some say that she turned Cain into a vampire, but the legend goes that Lilith is the mother of vampires, and that she goes after men and then has sex with them and then becomes pregnant, and what comes from that would be demons or Lilu. So that is the big myth surrounding Lilith. Hate to bring Supernatural back into this, but if you've seen Supernatural, you know what I'm talking about. It's the idea that Lilith is sort of the creator of the vampire line. So that is why Lilith is on here. This is so much. I love you guys, but I'm like super ready to end this episode. We've been through 3 batteries. I am exhausted. It is a lot to talk about. I've made a fool of myself trying to pronounce some of these names. If some of you are watching this and you're from the regions I've talked about and you would like to fix my pronunciation, I will not be offended, I promise. I'm doing the best I can. Go listen to my podcast episodes if you want more on Lilith or more on some of the other things that we've talked about. But I need to wrap this up. That is part 2 of the Vampire Iceberg Explained. Go check out Chris Miskis' music if you really like what you're hearing here. Freaking go check out Vampire Tea. I don't know how many times I have to say this. I'm gonna wrap this up because I still have to now undertake the editing of this. Join me in a week for the 3rd part of the Vampire Iceberg Explained as we get closer and closer to Halloween. And also I will be, of course, releasing the first hour of my Bite Shift audiobook to honor Halloween. And then in November, we'll go back to the stuff that you guys are used to, which is us talking about movies and TV shows and books and all that stuff. I love you guys. Please tell me all the fun things you're doing in October and anything you would love for me to talk about. I love you guys. I wish you wicked hugs and bloody kisses. Good evening.